Ahsoka's ending has dark implications for Star Wars' future. Welcome back to Nerdist News, I'm Dan Casey, and today we're going to break down the finale of Ahsoka. The 8th and final episode, titled The Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord, was one full of twists, turns, and some seriously dark implications for the future of the galaxy far, far away. As the title of this video suggests, it was another happy landing, but maybe not a happy ending. We're going to break it all down for you in just a moment, and as always, if you prefer to read all about it, Michael Walsh has you covered over on Nerdist. However, to talk about this in detail, we have to spoil what happens in the Ahsoka finale. So if you haven't seen it yet and you're worried about that sort of thing, leave now before you learn your lesson the hard way.
That's great, but I don't have time for lessons right now.
Okay, let's get into it, shall we? While this series felt a bit uneven at times from a pacing perspective, Ahsoka delivered some of the best new characters in Star Wars lore in Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. It gave the big villain of the New Republic era appropriate gravitas, and it gave us a darker ending than I would have expected. It might not be as bleak as the finale of Empire Strikes Back with our heroes dismembered, dispersed, and displayed in carbonite, but it did see the bad guy emerging victorious and laying the groundwork for deadly threats to come that'll play out across The Mandalorian Season 4, maybe in Ahsoka Season 2 if that happens, and Dave Filoni's Mandoverse movie. But let's really unpack the dark implications of the heir to the Empire managing to escape from his exile in another galaxy. The episode's title cheekily invoked C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and it's fitting considering this is a story about a portal to another world full of ancient prophecies, ill-advised deals with witches, and magical resurrections.
Can't I have just one piece of Turkish delight to eat on my way home?
No! The titular Jedi, Witch, and Warlord are most likely Ahsoka, Morgan Elsbeth, and Thrawn respectively, although one could make the case for Ezra or Sabine being the Jedi and the Great Mothers being the Witch as well. Speaking of which, and speaking of witches, during the Great Mother's dark ritual to transform Morgan and give her the Gift of Shadows, they also gave her the Blade of Talzin. You may remember this witchy weapon from the Clone Wars episode The Disappeared Part 2. In that episode, the Great Mother Talzin battles Mace Windu using this weapon. And this magical blade is capable of resisting a lightsaber and even cutting one in half, as Ahsoka learned firsthand. Good thing she has two. Now, for my money, the Ahsoka series was at its best when it embraced the weird, creepy, and occult side of things, and the finale did so in spades, and that influence will likely extend into the future of the galaxy far, far away as Thrawn's alliance with the Great Mothers continues to yield deadly dividends. In exchange for their assistance on Peridia and the aid of their dark magic, a word that's been spelled like 8 different ways in the subtitles on this show, Thrawn agreed to transport back hundreds of what appears to be sarcophagi. By the episode's end, Thrawn made good on his end of the bargain. He delivers the Great Mothers and their carrion luggage directly to Dathomir for some incredible death's door-to-door service. And to borrow a phrase from known gentleman and scholar Joel Rubin, what's the plan for these checked hags? The Great Mothers seemingly want to breathe new life into this dead world because the Night Sisters suffered a grievous defeat here during the Clone Wars that effectively wiped them out. However, there's also a line in this episode from Ezra about how Thrawn woke up the Night Sisters, and that raises a very different possibility. What if those weren't coffins at all? What if instead they were stasis pods keeping the Night Sisters in a state of suspended animation until they can make their way home to bring supernatural reanimation to the galaxy far, far away? It's certainly less badass than like a sect of ancient necromantic witches from this long-lost galaxy bringing their brethren back to life in their home away from ancestral home, but it is possible. Dead or barely alive, it doesn't really matter because the Great Mothers are capable of using their dark powers for all manner of horrifying purposes, especially when it comes to raising the dead. And like the dead, that raises another possibility. What if those coffins contain deceased Night Troopers that Thrawn and the Great Mothers will use to reclaim Dathomir and whatever else might stand in their way? Thrawn mentioned they sustained heavy casualties during their time on Peridia, and as video games taught us, bad guys love having a second health bar. It's also the perfect cover to wreak havoc without attracting the New Republic's attention. They already think everything related to Thrawn sounds like an old spacewives tale, and that goes double if you throw in evil witches and undead soldiers. Senator Ziono would have a field day.
Honestly, are we to believe any of it?
Now, moving on, one of the most chilling developments in this episode was seeing some of Thrawn's night troopers choose to make the ultimate sacrifice for their leader. They heard the immortal words of Eiffel 65 and said, "All right, bet. I'm blue. If I were green, I would die." They are true blue for Thrawn, and through the Great Mother's magic green energy, it brings them back from beyond the grave as shambling zombies. Now, the internal logic here was kind of odd to me at first because they initially move like these shambling hordes of undead straight out of any zombie movie. And at one point, Ezra needs Sabine's help to escape from this like Resident Evil style QuickTime event. Like you can practically see them put the button inputs on the screen saying like bash X to break free. Later on, though, they're able to use complex machinery to slice through conveniently placed blast doors, which apparently work the same in every galaxy.
That ought to hold him for a while.
But I guess it's to be expected given what we know about Marok. That Inquisitor turned smoke monster was also an undead mistman capable of speech and even piloting an aircraft in his new form. So maybe they just take time to warm up after the icy finger of death taps them on the shoulder. Mostly though, I just want to see more of those two towering beef castles that Sabine and Ezra fought. They were just like absolute nightmares, and we should have known something was amiss when one of them just straight up tanked a lightsaber stab to the chest that would have turned most people into a pile of loose robes. But as it turns out, standard zombie rules do apply even in the Star Wars universe. A lightsaber lobotomy is the best way to take them out. But like every other obstacle that Thrawn threw at Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra, these acceptable losses all tallied up to a major dub in Thrawn's favor. Every pawn that Thrawn sacrificed helped him buy enough time for a tactical retreat, and this cold calculus and ruthless efficiency of his planning is what makes him such a terrifying opponent. And now the heir to the Empire is back, with very few people to stand in his way, save for like Hera, Ezra, and Chopper, who you just know is champing at the bit to murder some imps.
Oh, now you're the big hero?
With that said though, Thrawn's just about the only person who didn't leave us on a cliffhanger, and that's mostly because he had said cliff nuked from orbit. And speaking of cliffhanger endings, Baylan Skoll, everybody! The former Jedi makes a brief but incredibly impactful appearance with a major clue about his ongoing quest. In Episode 6, Baylan confided to his apprentice Shin Hati that he's looking for a mysterious power on Peridea.
What I seek is the beginning, so I may finally bring this cycle to an end.
Whatever Baylan's looking for will theoretically let him bring this endless cycle of the Jedi and the Sith to an end. And to do so, he must find the beginning, and that's led him to some pretty important figures, quite literally in this case. While the mythological Norse wolf for which Baylan Skoll is named chases the sun, here he seems to be chasing the son, and the father, and the daughter. Remember those massive statues of the Great Mothers we compared to the Argonath from Lord of the Rings previously? Those were like baby town frolics compared to what Baylan stands atop now. Gigantic statues of the Mortis gods. And specifically, he's standing on the statue of the father. Now, for those who don't know, the Mortis gods are powerful beings that dwell on a world known as Mortis. They first appeared in the Clone Wars and have loomed large over the galaxy far, far away's mythology ever since. They represent different aspects of the Force. The daughter represents the light side, the son represents the dark side, and the father represents the balance between them. Their presence here on Peridea, a world believed to be an old folktale by many Jedi, suggests that this ruined world could have powerful connections to the very origins of the Force itself. And it's fitting that Baylan is standing atop the father because he can sense that this vicious cycle of warring between light and dark has thrown the universe out of balance. However, it seems like Baylan is seeking to not just rebalance the scales, but to destroy them altogether. In Norse myth, when Skoll finally catches the sun, it plunges the world into darkness during the events of Ragnarok. That apocalyptic event culminates with the death of the gods and the destruction of the world, only for it to be born anew. So does this mean that like Baylan's gonna square up with the Mortis gods? Well, probably not. But it also doesn't rule out the idea that a darker entity could be calling out to Baylan as well. For example, there's Abeloth. This Star Wars Legends dark side murder monster has a deep connection to the Mortis gods, and she's been a popular fan theory. It's definitely a stretch, but considering how much this season leaned into the occult, anything's possible. Now, moving on, we can draw further analogs between people on Peridea and the Mortis gods as well. While Anakin Skywalker was handpicked by the father to restore balance to the Force previously, now Baylan seems to be the one heeding this call. And I mean, he kind of even looks like the father as well. So if Baylan is the father representing balance, then Ahsoka is the daughter representing the light side. Dave Filoni and company made that crystal clear with the appearance of that green convor, Morai, that Ahsoka saw at the episode's end. Morai is Ahsoka's constant companion and is said to be the embodiment of the daughter's spirit. And the daughter also literally gave her spirit to Ahsoka once previously. She transferred her essence to save Ahsoka's life after the son killed her on Mortis. He was attempting to lure Anakin to the dark side. And it's also fitting that the statue of the daughter is headless, because Ahsoka spent so much of this season getting her head right, so she can finally arrive at a place where she's able to move on and embrace her inner light. As for the son, that's a bit trickier. Originally, I would have said Sabine. Huyang had some comments this episode about how Ahsoka worried about what she might become if she reached her full potential as a Jedi. In the wake of the Purge of Mandalore, vengeance was probably Sabine's #1 motivator, and that was a major red flag for Ahsoka. Instead, the son could now probably be someone like Shin Hati. She's someone who's lost her way without her master's guidance. And although she seems like she's on the path to becoming an unlikely ally for Ahsoka, she's currently adrift. Her desire for power and her impatience to achieve victory could lead her down a path toward the dark side, especially in Baylan's absence. Now, the presence of the Mortis God statues raise another question, one about whether the world between worlds could play another important role in helping our heroes on their respective journeys. Baylan to break the cycle, and Sabine and Ahsoka to find a way back home. Now, for those who don't know, the world between worlds first appeared in Star Wars Rebels. It's basically an extraplanar dimension that serves as a nexus of space and time in the Star Wars universe. And it was originally accessed by Ezra Bridger via this Super Mario 64-esque painting portal in a Jedi temple on Lothal. Inside the world between worlds, Ezra discovered many portals leading to distinct points in time, and he used one of them to save Ahsoka's life during her duel with Darth Vader in a Sith temple on Malachor, some 2 years after it happened. Now, the world between worlds doesn't facilitate time travel, at least not in the traditional sense, but the voices that Ezra heard inside ran the gamut from Star Wars' past, present, and future.
This is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy created by all living things.
So maybe we could see a new side of this realm in future seasons that could let our heroes travel a great distance in the blink of an eye. Moving on, this was an episode with so many familiar elements and moments from Star Wars' past. It felt like one giant evocation of George Lucas's infamous line.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
There were so many callbacks, visual homages, and parallels to previous Star Wars stories. From cheeky nods to Yoda's iconic do or do not line,
I do,
to the winking joke about the lightsabers on Rebels being too thin,
The blade emitter's too narrow.
to the framing of Anakin looking out after Ahsoka as she walks away. This time was definitely less wistful though, partly because of Ahsoka's very meta line about how it's time to move on. Now, perhaps the biggest parallel of all is something of an inversion. Once again, Dave Filoni gave us an ending where Ezra and Thrawn blast off into the great unknown. Except this time, no space whales were required, just like 8 hyperdrive cores. And while we thought this episode might evoke Empire Strikes Back, it also offered the galaxy far, far away a new hope in the form of Ezra's return.
Huh? Oh, the uniform.
And maybe now Ezra can train Jacen Syndulla just as Jacen's father trained him.
He was my master.
Now, as for what else the future holds, the galaxy far, far away is facing one of its deadliest threats yet. A ruthless, charismatic, tactical genius, which is capable of raising the dead, and a legion of troops that follow Thrawn like a cult leader. With only mere pockets of resistance to oppose him, whatever plot Thrawn is fomenting is sure to make a major impact. What, do you think we forgot?
Thank you, sir.
Anyway, folks, there you have it. That's everything you need to know about the Ahsoka finale and its dark implications for Star Wars' future. We'll have even more deep dives on Nerdist in the days ahead, but for now, tell us, what did you think of this episode? Did you spot anything that we missed?
Nothing.
Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.